Hello and welcome to Telecom TV. We are at ETSI NFV 13 and we've been doing it since ETSI NFV 4, so we're starting to get the hang of it. We're in Croke Park in Dublin in Ireland at the GAA, the headquarters of the Gaelic Athletic Association, and we're in the executive boardroom, and very executive it is too. It's a very flash place. It's a cross between sort of King Arthur's Round Table and I don't know what else, sort of something from a Bond movie, but it's well worth being here. And I'm talking with Robert Winters, who's director of Cobham Wireless Ireland. Robert, pleasure to meet you. Thanks for talking to us. Cobham Wireless is sponsoring this particular ETSI NFV event, number 13, and we've heard quite a bit about you over the course of the day. When you're wearing another hat, it's Terra VM, T-E-R-A-V-M?
Terra VM, that's correct, Martin.
Tell us about it.
Terra VM, basically the idea behind our product is to emulate, simulate lots of customer traffic. So in that kind of environment, you can imagine in the transformation to NFV, a lot of the service providers, key vendors out there in the market need to determine what's the quality of experience ultimately for their end users. We provide the tools to allow them to determine that.
Let's get into the meat of the interview then, Robert. After the buzz of the announcement of the NFV technology originally, the POCs, proofs of concept, the field trials, and some limited actual commercial rollout of virtualized services, people are beginning to say, we thought we'd have a bit more of this by now. Seems to be a bit slow and a bit partial. Do you think it's taking longer than it was expected to? And if so, why? For example, is it because service providers have been a bit more cautious than vendors thought they would be?
Well, you're talking about a very major transformation in the network. It's, when you compare it to other technology trends over the last 20 years, it's probably the greatest transformation that has actually happened or can potentially happen within the telco environment. So that really requires very careful planning. It needs to be very well thought out, and it needs to take into account transforming the entire telco across. So not a trivial task, and like every great plan, once you try and engage it, it usually takes a little bit longer than anticipated. But it's all going very much in earnest, and folks are moving towards the ideal of an NFV transformation.
So Robert, when NFV and ETSI first got together, as it were, the first documentation made many references to the notion of ecosystems, very much a buzzword over the past few years. The manufacturers have been collaborating and partnering in big build-out open vendor ecosystems since then. What do those ecosystems look like now? Have they changed? Have they adapted? Have they mutated? And what has the response to them been from service providers?
I'd almost turn that question a little bit around, because what I've seen is that service providers are driving the ecosystem. So over the last couple of years, with many of the service providers we work with, a lot of it's been about investigating what alternatives do you have in terms of putting together an ecosystem. So I would say in the last 6 months and moving into 2016 now, decisions are being made around how these ecosystems are being put together. That in turn then influences the providers of infrastructure. What we're called the network equipment manufacturers, they are putting together solutions based around fitting into the service provider ecosystem environment.
One thing that did not concern me, amused me more than anything else, made me sort of prick at my ears a bit anyway. As I understood it, I think as most people understand it, NFV is supposed to be an overarching technology, globally applicable. And now we suddenly hear people talking about Carriergrade NFV as though it's something different to ordinary NFV. Is it?
It's the same requirement is still there. At the end of the day, just because you're going virtual doesn't mean you can back out of your obligation to provide a carrier-grade network. So service providers around the planet are still have to provide carrier-grade services to their customers. They still need to provide 5 nines reliability, no downtime, and that has to translate as much into a virtual environment as it does in the fixed physical world.
The business transformation that goes hand in hand with technology transformation and the emergence of the virtualized network shows that many operators simply do not have the skill sets necessary to manage that transformation quickly and efficiently. It's pretty obvious that you're going to have to get some new blood in somewhere along the way, new specialists. Where are they going to come from, and how soon do you think they will make a mark?
That's a very apt question. Really, what we're seeing at the moment is this whole movement towards a DevOps model, and development, QA, and operations all coming together to deliver services much faster than they have done so in the past. That creates a challenge in what would be called a traditional telco environment, which is used to delivering services over a period of weeks, months, moving that back down to potentially hours. So there's that, plus the combination with IT. So traditionally, telco, IT was a sort of a separate function. So what we're seeing is a merging of those two. So a sort of almost a hybrid skill set of telco expertise and IT. So that's, you may have seen the announcement, in fact, yesterday from AT&T.
I did.
The CEO himself said, guys, you have to upskill, and I want you to assign a certain amount of hours to upskill your capabilities. And I would think a lot of that has to be around getting into marrying together IT and telco expertise.
It's interesting because AT&T, a major giant tier one player, has really taken up the notion of transformation and NFV and the all IP network and the cloud in a big way, in a way that, and they've shown open acceptance and adherence to it in a way that many other tier one operators haven't. What do you think is different about them? They've just grabbed it and running with it?
I think that's essentially what's happened. I think right from the top, the CTO, Mr. Donovan, has specifically set a goal by 2020, and that's a well-publicized goal. Over 75% of 150 network functions have to be virtualized by 2020. So it's an ambitious goal, but it's great. It's great to hear it. It's coming from the top, and that has to filter all the way down. And I think other telcos are listening and saying, oh, this is possible, and here is the kind of time frame we need. I
was going to ask you exactly that question. I'm going to say, you've got your ear to the ground. Have you heard that others are taking cognizance of what they're saying and thinking, we better do something ourselves, and we're going to be...
Absolutely, yeah. All the large service providers from my various travels around the planet, you know, right the way from Asia through Europe, North America, South America, all embracing this concept of, well, let's get our ecosystems decided upon. Let's start moving forward with, you know, a phased approach to delivering this network transformation. It won't happen overnight, but let's pick them off one by one and get this job done.
Last question to you. Last question of the day, in fact. So it's been said that network transformation and virtualization is like building a plane when you're actually flying it. Back in 2013, this company, Telecom TV, that we're on now, conducted a survey which indicated, from service providers and vendors, that indicated it would take 2 to 3 years before we would see virtualization in carrier networks. That was 3 years ago, as we said. If you were asked the same question today, in mid-late February 2016, what answer or estimate would you give?
I would say, depending on the size of operation that I'm running, I would think 2 to 3 years would be ambitious to transform the entire network. There's the previous example with AT&T, 150 network functions. That's a lot of projects to get through in a 2-year period. So I would say it's probably more like a 4 to 5 year span that's kind of credible these days. Now, having said that, I think processes and technology will help to improve that cycle.
I said it was the last question, but there's a little codicil to it. A little bird told me that ETSI NFV will continue beyond the end of this year, 2016. It was the authorization was going to end then. It looks as though, even though it's not been ratified yet, but it's going to be, you will continue into 2017 and 18. What do you think the result of that will be? Presumably the early part of getting everything sorted, the speccing and everything is now done. What will happen in the future?
Well, I think the things like what was called proof of concepts will start melding into a far more practical, real live network type scenario. We'll be hearing a lot more about how the experience has been in deploying and actually launching services. And there'll be a whole new slew of issues and areas to cover through ETSI in determining how to help scale those networks. So very interesting times ahead, I think.
Well, that was an interesting interview. Robert Winters, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Martin.